What if the person you love isn't physically touching anyone else, but they're texting them every night? What if they're sending heart emojis to someone who isn't you, sharing their deepest thoughts with a coworker, or sliding into DMs they'd never want you to see? Is that cheating? Because right now, in January 2026, this debate is absolutely exploding online. Millions of people are arguing about this exact question, and here's the wild part. Psychology says the answer isn't as simple as you think. Picture this. It's 11 p.m. Your partner is lying next to you in bed and their phone lights up. They quickly tilt the screen away. You notice they're smiling at a text from someone you don't know. When you ask who it is, they say, "Just a friend from work," and change the subject. Nothing physical happened, right? So technically, not cheating. But something feels off. Your gut is screaming that something's wrong, and according to research from 2026, you're not crazy. 76% of people now say that a non-sexual but emotionally intimate relationship counts as cheating. That number jumps even higher for married people. But here's where it gets messy. The other 24% completely disagree. So who's right? Let's start with what psychology actually defines as infidelity today, because it's way more than just sex. Researchers use the term extradiatic involvement, which basically means violating your relationship's expectations of exclusivity, whether that's sexual, romantic, or emotional. A 2023 review broke it down into 4 main types. First, there's sexual infidelity, the classic physical betrayal. Second, emotional infidelity, secret emotional intimacy and romantic feelings with someone else. Third, combined infidelity, both sexual and emotional, which research shows is the most devastating type. And fourth, cyber infidelity, sexting, explicit chats, emotional affairs through DMs, flirty Snapchats that disappear, the whole digital world of connection that didn't exist 20 years ago. And then there's this newer term that's taking over social media, micro-cheating. This is the gray area. Liking your ex's thirst traps on Instagram, texting someone you know your partner wouldn't be okay with, keeping certain friendships secret, having inside jokes with someone that feel a little too intimate. In January 2026, Instagram and TikTok are full of people debating this. One viral post said, "If you hide it, you're cheating," and it got thousands of comments from people either completely agreeing or calling it toxic and controlling the truth. It depends entirely on the boundaries in your specific relationship. But here's where the psychology gets really interesting. There's something called the online disinhibition effect, and it explains why texting someone else can feel so different from talking to them in person. When we're online, our brains basically lower their guard. We feel invisible, we're physically distant from the other person, and there's no immediate consequence we can see. A 2024 study found that people with emotion regulation difficulties experience way more online disinhibition, and that leads them to say and do things they'd never do face to face. They share more, flirt more, cross boundaries more. It's like the screen creates this psychological bubble where normal rules don't apply. You'd never touch a coworker's hand at the office, but you might send them a thinking of you text at midnight. You'd never whisper secrets to someone else while your partner is standing right there. But you'll DM them while your partner is asleep next to you. The behavior is the same. The betrayal is the same, but the screen makes it feel somehow less real. Except it's not less real, it's just easier to rationalize. Now let's talk about the big debate. Emotional versus physical betrayal. Which one hurts more? The research on this is fascinating and honestly pretty surprising. Evolutionary psychologists like David Buss found that men and women often react differently. Men tend to report more distress over sexual infidelity because, from an evolutionary standpoint, there was a risk of raising another man's child. Women tend to report more distress over emotional infidelity because they risk losing their partner's long-term commitment and resources. But here's the thing. Those are statistical averages, not hard rules. Plenty of men are absolutely destroyed by emotional cheating, and plenty of women are devastated by the physical kind. What really matters is what it represents. Therapist Janice Abrams Spring, who wrote After the Affair, says the core of infidelity isn't really about sex or even feelings. It's about betrayal of trust, and what she calls the shattering of the self. When you discover your partner has been emotionally intimate with someone else, sharing things they don't share with you, you lose your sense of being special to them. One study from 2023 found that people who experienced a spouse's infidelity had worse long-term chronic health, even years later, because of the psychological trauma and chronic stress. Another study described betrayed partners as experiencing symptoms similar to PTSD, hypervigilance, flashbacks of discovering the betrayal, intrusive thoughts, inability to feel safe. So, whether it's physical or emotional, the impact is profound. So why do people cross these lines in the first place? Let's get into the actual research, because the reasons are way more complex than they're just a bad person. Dylan Selterman and his team at the University of Maryland studied nearly 500 young adults who had cheated and identified 8 core motives. First, anger or revenge, getting back at a partner for their own betrayal or neglect. Second, sexual desire, feeling unsatisfied or just wanting more variety. Third, lack of love, realizing you've fallen out of love or were never really in love. Fourth, neglect, not getting enough attention, affection, or respect, feeling emotionally starved. Fifth, low commitment, never really being exclusive in the first place, or not seeing a long-term future. Sixth, situation or opportunity, alcohol, travel, work trips, moments where inhibitions are lowered. Seventh, esteem, using the affair to feel desirable, powerful, or validated when you're feeling low about yourself. And eighth, variety, just wanting multiple experiences, driven by novelty and the fear of missing out. The fascinating part, men in the study were more likely to report sexual desire, variety, and situational motives. Women were more likely to report neglect. But everyone had motives, plural. It's rarely just one thing. It's usually a combination of personal vulnerabilities, relationship problems, and the right opportunity at the wrong time. And this is where attachment theory comes in. A 2023 meta-analysis of over 13,000 people found that insecure attachment is significantly linked to higher rates of infidelity. If you have an avoidant attachment style, meaning you're uncomfortable with deep closeness and value independence, you might use affairs to maintain emotional distance or avoid depending on one person. If you have an anxious attachment style, meaning you fear abandonment and crave reassurance, you might seek validation from others when you feel insecure in your relationship. Both types struggle with emotion regulation, which makes it easier to act impulsively when temptation shows up. And here's the kicker. Many people don't even realize they have these patterns until they're in therapy, trying to figure out why they keep sabotaging their relationships. There's also the personality factor. Research links certain traits to higher infidelity risk. High neuroticism, which means you're moodier and more emotionally reactive. High extroversion, which means you're super social and flirtatious. High openness to experience, which means you crave novelty. And low conscientiousness, which means you're more impulsive and less disciplined. And then there are the dark triad traits, narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. People high in these traits have lower empathy, feel entitled, and are really good at rationalizing betrayal. They see partners more as resources than as people. So where does this leave us if you're wondering whether texting someone else is cheating? Psychology says it depends on 3 things. First, intent. Are you seeking emotional or sexual connection outside your relationship? Second, secrecy. Are you hiding it because you know it would hurt your partner? And third, boundaries. Does it violate what you and your partner agreed was acceptable? Therapist Shirley Glass, who wrote Not Just Friends, said affairs don't start with sex. They start when you open a window to someone else and close a window to your partner. That window could be a text conversation that gets a little too deep. It could be sharing complaints about your relationship with someone who isn't a neutral party. It could be that little dopamine hit you get when their name pops up on your phone. The brutal truth is, modern technology has made it easier than ever to cross emotional boundaries without realizing it. You don't have to sneak out to a hotel. You just have to open your phone. And because of the online disinhibition effect, it feels less serious until it's too late and your relationship is in crisis. Research shows that up to 30% of people who start sexual conversations online eventually meet up in person. What starts as just talking becomes an emotional affair, which becomes a physical one. Here's the practical takeaway. If you're in a relationship, have the awkward conversation now, before there's a problem. Define your boundaries together. Is it okay to text an ex? What about liking revealing photos? Should you mention when someone flirts with you? What level of emotional intimacy with others feels threatening? These aren't one-size-fits-all answers. They're specific to you too. And if you're already in the gray area, ask yourself, would I do this if my partner were standing right next to me? Would I be okay if they did the same thing? If the answer is no, you already know what you need to do. So here's my question for you, and I really want to hear your take in the comments. Where do you draw the line? Is texting someone else late at night cheating, or is it only cheating if it gets physical? Have you ever been in a situation where micro-cheating destroyed trust, or do you think people are being too sensitive? Drop your thoughts below, because this debate isn't going anywhere and your perspective might help someone else figure out their own situation.